What do you see? What's going through the heads of these two leaders as they stand next to each other?
I think that right now they're trying to download what happened last night. David mentioned they had that dinner at the Blair House, and this is keeping with a White House strategy that started in Beijing last year and even Sunnylands in California on their first visit together in 2013, where the president believes the best way to talk to Xi Jinping, the best way to actually get messages and perhaps negotiations across is to do it one-on-one in private settings. When you're in group negotiations, it becomes a talking points festival, more or less. So what we saw last night was a repeat of what we saw in Beijing, a private dinner between the two where undoubtedly, according to White House officials I've spoken to this morning, cybersecurity came up. The big issue that everybody's touting right now is that climate agreement that you talked about, guys, and that started actually in November in Beijing, where they reached a big agreement that kind of jump-started the talks for the international climate talks in Paris in December. This kind of another step in that direction. But again, whether it's territorial claims in the East and South China Sea or most notably cybersecurity right now, there are a lot of major differences here. And this relationship is not on solid ground, at least according to U.S. officials. So there's a lot weighing on not just what happened last night, but also these bilateral negotiations that'll start right after the pomp and circumstance this morning.
So interesting, you know, we had Susan Rice making a major speech at George Washington University previewing this visit by President Xi. You talking about the relationship between these two men, again, forged, as you say, at Sunnylands, forged in these private moments together. I understand there's going to be sort of two parts of the series of bilateral meetings today, one of the two of them and then a larger one with the cabinet as well. So it sounds like, at least from a personal perspective, the two of them are maybe making some progress, getting along a bit better.
It's interesting, David, and I was with the president on the trip to Beijing last year, and you talked to White House officials about the relationship between these two men. And the president, likes is a strong word here, but I think he's, one, genuinely curious about Xi Jinping and the leadership he's tried to take to the country that he's currently running. But he also kind of enjoys the give and take between the two. He feels like they have a candid relationship in these private meetings. They've been able to speak one-on-one in a way that maybe leaders of these two countries haven't in the past. I think the president's focus here, and you hear this from all White House officials, is engage on the issues of agreement. In this case, it's climate, it's Afghanistan, it's the Iran talks, and then try and work out a way around the areas of disagreement. I think the concern you hear from critics right now is that is essentially open the door to President Xi being more aggressive on several fronts. I think the White House, this is a key meeting, this is a key visit to see whether or not that strategy of engagement is effective or whether it's just completely fallen flat, David.
Phil, I'm thinking back to Copenhagen, where Obama laid so much of his own personal political capital, put it on the table there, and made a trip to Copenhagen to try and get some sort of agreement. And Hu Jintao from China at that point played the spoiler. He refused to meet one-on-one with any world leaders, and basically he had people run around trying to make sure an agreement didn't happen. You've been talking about the personal relationship between these two leaders. What groundwork are they laying right now to make sure that Paris is more successful than Copenhagen?
I think both of these countries, as the two kind of largest pollutants in the polluting countries in the entire world, are cognizant of the fact that if there's going to be any type of major agreement in Paris, if Paris is going to work, in a sense, they need to be the two leaders in that. I think what the president sees here, what President Obama sees here, is critics about cap and trade, critics about climate, have always said in the last 3 or 4 years, even back in 2009 when the administration was first pushing cap and trade, that, hey, if you don't get China to come along with you, nothing that the United States does matters. All it does is set us back, set us at an economic disadvantage. Well, the big deal last November when they got China to agree to kind of top-line emissions reductions was that, hey, we got China with us. Hopefully this will help pull India along. Hopefully this will help pull other countries along. So, again, while those disagreements are very serious on issues like territorial claims and cyber, I think on climate, laying the groundwork, Brendan, as you said, for Paris, these are the two key players right now. And if these two key players not only can set realistic targets, set aggressive targets, but also go almost as a united front into Paris in December, I think that sets a tone that I think maybe a year ago at this time, nobody really thought was in play.
Yeah, so just to recap what we're watching here, this is Bloomberg Surveillance. I'm David Gura with Brendan Greeley. You're hearing from our man in Washington, Phil Mattingly. We're looking at photos here, pictures here of the South Lawn of the White House, President Xi Jinping, President Obama, greeting people who have come to hear from the two men there at the White House before a series of bilateral meetings take place at the White House today on President Xi's state visit to the U.S. There'll be a state dinner tonight.
And of course, Phil, we've been talking about climate change and the agreements in the lead up to Paris, but of course in the background is also China's security posture. The two leaders just walked past in review what looked to be about a platoon's worth of Marines and then some airmen. I'm thinking when I see that also some very real combat Marines have been sent to northern Australia, which is very obviously a signal to China. As the two go into these talks, what is the state of play?
It's not good. And I mean, that seems like a simplistic way to put it. But if you just watch what's happened over the last year, year and a half, it's really kind of hit a downward slope that's concerned a lot of U.S. allies, whether it be Japan or Vietnam or South Korea. And it's obviously concerned U.S. military leaders, what's going on in the South China Sea with the building of what U.S. intelligence officials believe are military installations. It's caused a lot of problems in the relationship. The biggest issue here from White House officials' standpoint is they're not sure what pushback actually has an impact. We've sent naval vessels. The president's Air Force One flew through the expanded Chinese air defense zone in April of last year, trying to make a statement of some sort, and none of that has had an effect. So I think the question going into this is there anything the U.S. can do either in these meetings behind closed doors or with their kind of public military posture going forward that can have any type of impact on what Xi Jinping's military is doing right now? As of now, they've more or less come up empty, and it's kind of one of those issues that you can get in candid moments with White House officials, them to acknowledge, also something they're willing to acknowledge. U.S. allies in the region are very uncomfortable about that fact, guys.